Hi, I'm Paris, and having finished my first week of chemotherapy, I thought you might like an update on how I'm doing. Well, today, I actually feel fairly good. However, days 3, 4, and 5 after my infusion, I was not prepared for how I was going to feel. At the pre-chemo counseling, where they go over everything involved with chemo, and you have to agree this is a course you'd like to do, they have the long list of possible side effects, and it says at the top, you may experience some or none of these, which really wasn't that helpful because there's a long list. I think it would be better if it said, it's likely you'll experience at least some effect of a number of these, because that's what I found to be the case. There were only a couple that were really bad, but I had a taste of quite a few of them. But to go back to the day of my chemo infusion, it was October 30th, so it was the day before Halloween. I was very nervous going into the center for this. What made it so surreal, though, was the day before Halloween, all of the staff and the nurses were all in costume. So I had a goblin drawing my blood, and then a pirate came up to hook up the IV in these different things, and a princess ended up being my care nurse while I was having my chemo infusion. So it was a weird day to start something so life-changing, but it really wasn't as bad as my brain had built it up to be. Of course, it's unpleasant having the IV, but I think what made the most difference, they give you a couple drugs in advance of the actual chemo. At least this is my experience. Again, for everyone else it may be different. But to reduce the nausea and some of the other side effects, they gave me, I don't know what all, something and a steroid. And what was strange was, as I was getting the actual chemo and for several hours afterwards, I would say I actually felt better than I normally do, which is a weird thing, and I attribute it completely to the effect of the steroids, because they can give you this inflated sense of well-being even when you aren't so well. But being under the influence of steroids does help pass the time. So I was there maybe 3.5, 4 hours in total from when I got there and they took the blood, and then I had to wait and then read the results with someone and talked about it. Finally got back to the chair. They have to start the other drugs in advance so they have time to take effect before they actually hook up the bag that has your chemo in it. The chemo they're giving me is called Taxotere or Docetaxel. It's made from a plant from the Pacific Northwest. And I remember when I was younger, because I grew up in Seattle, I remember hearing in the news about them finding this extract from this tree bark that they thought they'd be able to start using in cancer treatments. Little did I know decades later, I'd be receiving it. When they hooked the bag up to the little pump machine that I had connected to my IV, didn't feel anything, didn't feel burning, hot or cold. It was weird knowing all the effects that it was going to have, that was going into my body, but I didn't feel anything at the moment. I looked at the people in the chairs around me. Most of them were older, men and women. The ones even younger than me, I really felt bad for having to go through that. But for passing the time, they have these TVs mounted up above. Every 2 chairs, there was one TV. And as I looked around, it was Fox News and Fox News and Fox News and Fox News. And the one in front of me was the Weather Channel, which is enjoyed by older people of all political persuasions equally. I had my Kindle and my phone with me, and family and a couple friends who very kindly offered to chat with me while I was going through this to help support me and to help pass the time. The problem with both those options is you need your fingertips to type and to turn pages on the Kindle. And Taxotere, one of the side effects that I really do not want to have, and fortunately haven't had a sign of yet, is neuropathy, which is the pins and needles stinging in your fingers and your toes, because the chemotherapy can damage the very small nerve endings there. Now, there is a way they found to help reduce the likelihood of that, and that is to have the ends of your hands, the ends of your feet in cold packs. I had assumed they would provide those there. They've got pillows and blankets and water, whatever you need. They're very nice about bringing you things. But when I asked one of the I don't remember which character it was, an Alice from Alice in Wonderland maybe, about getting an ice pack, they brought it over and they just looked at me kind of quizzically and asked, I want it placed somewhere? I said, oh, that's okay. And so I had it, I thought, well, is this what you get? Well, I guess I'll use it for my hands. So I had it sort of wrapped around my fingertips. And then my chemo nurse came by a little later and saw that and said, did you want those for your hands and your feet? And I said, oh, yes, please. So I got 4 of them. And It's hard to balance them on your feet because I was thinking you sort of stuck your fingers and toes in them, but I was told by my chemo nurse that no, you put the cold pack over the backs of your fingers and over the backs of your toes and part of your foot. Well, it's hard to balance in your socks. So anyway, the balancing act on both the backs of the hands and the feet also helped to pass the time, but it made it so I couldn't use my phone or my Kindle. So after that experience, I went online and bought these. These are cold pack mitts that you put in your freezer the night before, and then you bring them with to chemo, and they've got the packs that will fit right where you want on your hands. And these are the slippers that work the very same way, so the cold will all be going right where it needs to go and reducing my risk of getting that neuropathy in fingers and toes. I'll be trying these out on the day of my next infusion in about a week and a half, and then I'll do a review. They finished up the chemo, took an hour and a half, then they put up a saline and they flushed it for a while, and they just wanted to make sure how I felt. I started a notebook where I've been recording the different symptoms that I've had as the days have gone by. And it's kind of funny, on the first day I actually wrote, felt fine during infusion, actually felt better than usual afterwards. Might be effect of the steroids. But a few hours later, the steroids wore off and my energy levels sank. The Taxotere, like a lot of chemo drugs, it goes in and kills off fast-dividing cells, which are what cancer cells are. But you also naturally have fast-dividing cells, lining of your mouth, lining of your intestine and colon, so you can sort of lose a generation of those where everything sloughs off. Skin cells, hair cells, I'll tell you about that in a minute. And most concerningly, blood cells. It goes in and does a number on your bone marrow, so a generation of those cells seem to get wiped out, and then it starts over again building them back up. But in the meantime, you can have issues with white blood cells, red blood cells, or platelets, each of which have their own scary complications. The next morning when I got up, I did feel nauseous and queasy a little bit. Now, they gave me a couple different medications that I could take when nausea came on, but it wasn't to the point I felt I needed to take that, and actually I have not taken those medications at all. Some people, depends on the person and the chemo and which chemo and so forth, but nausea is often strongly associated with doing chemo, and that's really one that I was not looking forward to. And again, it can change as you have multiple infusions. You can pick up symptoms and side effects you didn't have before, but first time through, nausea hasn't been an issue. So that queasiness passed. By later in the morning, I was able to eat breakfast. I was able to go out for a couple-mile walk. But I realized by afternoon, as I was eating something else, that something that normally happens in the morning hadn't happened. I hadn't had a bowel movement, and I thought, well, that's strange. I'll just have to keep an eye on that. The next morning, got up my usual time, had my usual breakfast, and remembered, oh yeah, that didn't happen this morning either. And it was later that morning that the constipation distress started. This is rarely an issue for me, especially in the last year and a half since I've changed my diet, lost 50 pounds. I eat a lot of high fiber plant food, so I probably have generally 80 grams of fiber a day. So it's not an issue of if I'm going to have a bowel movement, it's more, will it be 2 today or will it be 3 today? So to go a couple days with nothing happening, and I continued to eat my usual foods, so there was an awful lot of fiber and bulking up in there. By late morning, I realized things weren't going to happen on their own, so my wife went out to the drugstore and got some moderately gentle laxatives, and I started on those, and it was a bad day. It was the worst constipation I'd ever had in my life, followed by the most painful bowel movement ever had in my life. So I thought, well, I know you can have diarrhea and nausea, but apparently some people have constipation as a side effect of the chemo. And I made notes to myself here, next time, start eating fermented foods the day right after the infusion to help repopulate my gut bacteria. So fermented foods like kimchi, pickles, sauerkraut, yogurt, foods that can repopulate the bacteria that I need so I can properly digest my foods. Need to make an emphasis on that. Also, start with some gentle laxatives a little earlier in the process so I don't have to go to those stronger laxatives closer to the point of it becoming a real emergency. The next day, the exhaustion set in, but at least I was pooping. And if you got your pooping, you actually got a lot working in your favor. The next day, the exhaustion came back, joined with bone pain. Every single bone in my body hurt. Just to move it, it would hurt it. To think about moving it, it would almost hurt. And it was everywhere, turning my head, lifting my arm, taking a step. It was just also painful, which doubled with the exhaustion, had me not moving around very much. And I found sitting on the sofa with the family watching TV, I'd close my eyes and I'd open them, and 20 minutes had gone by and I'd just fallen asleep. And that happened several times that day. I was expecting some changes in taste. I was told that that could happen, and there's only one that's happened so far, but it's pretty consistent, and that's when I normally have a banana in the morning with my breakfast, and when I'd eat the banana, it would taste so creamy. It was almost inedible because it was just so creamy. And then I found when I was brushing my teeth, all the foam of the toothpaste was just so creamy, it was almost making me sick. So I'm sure it was related to that, but it's kind of a weird expression of it. That same day, the skin on my scalp and my face started to feel tight, and I used the word crunchy in here. I'm guessing dried out. And that's also the day I noticed, just running my hand through my hair, that, oh, there's a few hairs. I could normally do that and there'd be one or two, and this was to the point maybe there'd be 3 or 4. So it wasn't a lot of hair loss, but it was starting. That brings us up to Friday, which was 1 week after my infusion. So that's the day I go back for my blood test, and feeling much better. When they asked, do you have pain today? Really, I couldn't say that I did. And so it was all going well. Of course, they gave me a little pain, poked me and took 5 tubes of blood, and everything looked pretty good, except my white blood cell count, my mature white blood cell count, is down to 0. So that meant I was sitting in that waiting room full of people, pretty much with myself having no functioning immune system. It's scary to think about. Every breath I take, drink of something, I eat something, there's so many opportunities for any kind of organism or bacteria, virus, anything to get in and start doing stuff, and I have no protection against it. I was not happy to hear that, and the nurse practitioner who was going over my results with me also seemed kind of concerned. Let's see how your system does on its own, if it can get its numbers back up again in a few days' time. What they did do, just out of an abundance of caution, was to put me on an antibiotic, Augmentin. I'll find out this Friday, so in a few days' time, they have me back in again for another blood test and see how my white blood cell count is doing, and seeing how it responded after my first infusion. I'm guessing we can go by that to see where my days I need to be extra careful are after my future infusions. I stayed home all weekend. I did go out in the morning for my walk, but I went out while the streets were empty, and if there was anyone out walking their dog, I crossed the street and gave everyone a wide berth and had my mask as well. And all of my family here has been very nice about staying in and not going out, possibly being exposed to something and bringing it home. So they're having to hang out at home as well. Oh, and the last thing, the hair. I still have it, but it's going faster each day. A few days ago, it was those 3 or 4 hairs that would come out. And in the shower, it took a little longer to shampoo because you keep, feeling those hairs on the back of your hand and washing them off. And it kept going on like, is this ever going to stop? And then today it was a noticeable amount of hair coming off, shampooing and combing my hair as well. I actually found if I just sort of run my hand through my hair and give it kind of a yank, oh yeah, there's some hairs just come out with that little bit of encouragement. I think I'll go start my Christmas shopping and try to get some clues on what my family would like and get them some really nice things to show them the appreciation I have for how they're taking care of me. I appreciate you watching this video, and I'll see you on the next review.
There are so many choices and you don't want to stress. You want your health food at home, receiving only the best. That's what we're here for. We give honest reviews. parristx.